to Beware Spoilers. I am Adam. It has been a disproportionately long day. I'm probably just not sleeping well, if I'm being completely honest. Because I'm not strictly tired, per se, but I am a little tired. Well, anyway, here we are. I have now seen Honk For Jesus, Save Your Soul, which made its debut earlier this year at Sundance. The big film festival out in Utah? Colorado? Utah is where it is. So, the movie has now gotten its wide release after being based on a short film of same name, similar name, anyway, whatever. It's a mockumentary about a pastor who had a sex scandal and he's trying to bring his church back after the sex scandal. And I have complex feelings about this. I saw a review of it that said that the mockumentary makes a what's it called? It takes cheap shots at low hanging fruit. And I mean, look, I think it's easy to take shots at a church. It's not a particularly hard institution to take cracks at. I mean, not even specifically the Catholic Church, because this isn't. This is like a Southern Baptist. But either way, it's the kind of thing where they're taking these shots at it. It's not any one church specifically. It's kind of just the broader institutions of it. For me, I think the bigger issue is the mockumentary format. And I think I said this when we talked about Chronicle years ago at this point, when we talked about Chronicle on 30-minute reviews. I think I said something along the lines of Chronicle is cool until you get to the third act, and then it kind of does away with the found footage format to give you a big third act like a superhero movie, which, is what it kind of has to do. You have a similar issue here, but not to give you a big third act. I feel like the rules it kind of lays out for the documentary aren't really adhered to, and there are some stylistic choices that are, kind of modern, and I'm not entirely a fan of. Like the whole introducing a character by having them walk towards the camera while their name's on a lower lower cryon. I feel like that's an overused thing at this point. It is a fairly new thing, but it's overused nonetheless. There's a lot about this movie that is, kind of good. The performances are all great, and the set design is phenomenal. Production design and production value is all really great. To really give you this sense, and the story is not terrible either. It's just, I feel like the story doesn't want to commit really one way or the other, and I think that is kind of indicative of the end of the movie, where it is kind of up in the air about how well this comeback is going to work. It tries to flip, and I feel like, the whole turning, Giant Turn Trinity into more of a victim toward the end of the movie doesn't exactly work, considering how we've seen her all through the movie up until this point. It's kind of a flip at the last second. We get the breaks of the facade all through the movie, and that's good, but we see a lot of, she's completely in step with her husband, and, I think by and large, the worst person in the movie is definitely Curtis, and I just feel like by the time we get to the third act of this film, and we get to this big confrontation between one of the gentlemen who is suing Curtis, or settled with Curtis, for their affairs and his prying him with gifts and stuff like that to get him to open up, that by the time we get to that point, the movie is kind of I feel like we've gone too far. for her to be brought back to she's an equal victim with everyone else involved of his manipulation. And I think it's the fact that we see her through the whole thing. And I think that could be the point of how this works. Like, we get the entire point of it when we get to that ending of the movie is that she is she is as much a victim, but she, rather than turning on him, stuck with him. And because of that, she's kind of and when you hear the kind of grooming behavior he does to his other victims, and you can see on her face the moment that's kind of shattered on her, it is kind of great. And then her leaving after that is that it's like, oh, he's treating me no different than he treats them, because part of her knows that he's using her in that regard, but at the same time, it's like, I feel like there was they could have interspliced it a little bit better, because especially as we go through the movie, we get more and more about what she's doing to help him, and as more and more is done to help him, it makes it harder for us to be like, well, yes, he's using you too, but at the same time, just as much as people they play radio clips of people talking about the victims and being like, they were adults, they could have said no. And it's like, just as much as we use that to kind of explain away their behavior and try to defend him, it is kind of, by the time we get to the end, it is kind of showing that for her, she could have definitely done the same and not continued to support him in the way she did. I'm not saying it's her fault. I'm saying the movie could have done a better job portraying her kind of breaking from the brainwashing. What was the other thing that I liked about the movie? I feel like there was other stuff. I'm very tired today. I have no idea why I'm so tired. I just love the set design. Everything about the set design is great. And like the way they build the church and the way the church looks and all of that is all great. That was it. The third act is about his opening day. The reopening of the church, the triumphant return for him to the pulpit after being not ousted, but having to lay low for a little bit while the accusations kind of fizzle. And they're out there, you let it air out, and then you get to the end, and you're like, all right, so here are the accusations that are now been out in the open for a bit. Here's what's going to happen, and now we can, move on from them. So he lay low, and then he came back, and ta-da! Now he can reopen the church, and it's all about him trying to get the church reopened. And I feel like, again, by the time we get to this third act, we've heard a lot of debate over the course of the movie. Because they'll use establishing shots and they'll use radio show call-ins of people talking about what impact he had and how they feel about the allegations. And I don't think enough is done to show what the other church has done to attract more people in, where these people who have gone to him for years are suddenly willing to jump ship even as they defend him. And I think that's a little bit of a misfire too. I feel like more could have been done to show that, to properly explain that turn. And I am a big fan of whenever they show and turn the people of a town or a town itself into a character of sorts. I'm always a big fan of that. I've said that for Harry Potter did that. I've said that Daredevil did that very well with Hell's Kitchen, the show on Netflix that's now on Disney Plus. There's another movie recently that did the same thing. That was kind of like the setting became a character, and it's kind of the same thing here, where it's like having the audience respond, the people's response to what's going on, definitely helps the movie. It definitely does help. It's just if you're gonna do that and then have the third act be what it is. I think that for this movie to work, you can't have the people come back to him. You can't have that be the end. I mean, if this movie ends and people return to see him after seeing the whole, thing, and after seeing his whole, everything about him being laid bare and all of that, I feel like that doesn't quite work because he doesn't have a redemption arc. So, like, because he doesn't have that arc of redemption to become a different person over the course of a movie, you can't have him have a good outcome. It's unless that's the point you're trying to make, is that, look, it's like these... But at that point, then it really is attacking the low-hanging fruit, the religious people who are like, they don't care what you do, they'll still flock to you anyway. And it's like, look, you can do that movie, but I feel like having it where there's one car that pulls in that's new, and him seeing that as a victory, is kind of cheapening things a little bit. Because it's like, look, I mean, if you're going to have that happen, you're going to have one car show up, and that's possibly it. The car's doing donuts in the parking lot, but it could possibly pull in and, and be a new person at this, event. Then I could see that being a real, what's it called? Like that would be an interesting way to have ended off the movie. I just feel like it is a little bit of a, like, what's what I'm looking for here? It's not an oddity per se. It's just kind of like, I feel like the response from the town should have been more tepid, and not quite, and it should have been more anti him in the town if they're gonna make that case. I also wasn't a fan of the fact that they had the director, quote unquote, come to, start talking in the third act. I wasn't a fan of that decision. I don't think that was a good idea necessarily for the movie as a whole. Because I feel like it kind of, like, if they're doing it, and they say it throughout the movie, they say fly on the wall, but it's Veritas, but if they're going to do that, and the director's not going, and the director is asking questions, because they're doing talking heads. So it's like, alright, so the B-roll footage is going to be mostly like, them walking around and them leading and letting them do it, but inherently it's not fly on the wall for none of this. Like, that, as a filmmaker, the director of this movie, I mean, not the director of the movie itself, but the director of the movie within the movie, should have been like, look, they're addressing the camera constantly. This isn't true fly on the wall, as they say in the movie, because they keep turning to the camera, addressing the camera, dressing up their behavior to the camera to make it seem better, and it's just kind of not distracting per se, but it is something that will have an impact on the, what's it called? It is something that will have an impact on the enjoyment of the movie, because, like, look, you as a filmmaker, you have to pivot. You can't just say something and go with it and be like, well, we're set up to do this in the beginning, and we're going to continue it through to the end, regardless. Now, do I think that, the pivot not being there is indicative? It's kind of, I think what you run into is this idea of the script versus, like, what works for a comedy versus what works for, a real documentary. And because they're kind of playing this as kind of a comedy more than a straight documentary. I mean, it's not a real documentary because no one's drawing its actors and all of that, but because they're playing it as more of a comedy, that plays a little bit differently for the movie overall. And I feel like that's kind of the disconnect here, is that doesn't quite mesh properly. It's still a good movie. I'm not saying it's not a good movie. I did really enjoy it, but it's because these are nitpicky things that I feel like if you're going to do a mockumentary, commit to. Like, when I look at other documentaries, like this is Spinal Tap, or like Best in Show, or any of these, they pick a style and kind of commit to it. And throughout the movie, you can kind of tell that the whole way through they were always, this is what we're doing, this is our story, this is how we're telling our story. Even if it's, like, the characters are addressing the camera, just these movies will, meld that a little bit better. And it's like, while it is, largely the documentary and not talking a bunch, it still kind of, it still kind of melds it in where it works a little bit more seamless. Especially when they're outright saying, we're just trying to capture your life at several points during the movie. It's like they don't explain what the thought process is in those. It's like here they explain what the thought process is. But it's still good. Still worth a watch. It'll probably end up on Peacock if you don't want to go to a theater to see it. But it is worth a watch. So we'll wrap up there for today. And until our next episode, have a great rest of your week.